Hi everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In today's video I'd like to have another look at the USE Minis, particularly because the last video that I looked at was on the USE Minis anyway, was actually showing a very hard day, particularly last Thursday. Was a very hard day in the markets. Now what tends to happen in the markets is a phenomenon that I call the cyclical nature of trading. In other words, your trading results and how the markets unfold go through cycles of being very hard, being very easy, and then having periods of when you have small losses. In other words, you have periods when the profits come through quite readily, you have periods when you have small losing trades. The trick is keeping the losses small during that period. And then you have other periods when, quite frankly, the markets are just very unclear and it's just best stepping aside. So last Thursday, we were looking at this in our training webinar on Friday, and I was saying how last Thursday was a very hard day. So I want to look at how this changed very quickly on Friday, and how we got some very nice setups with the pattern being a lot more obvious. If you remember, I talk about looking at the three or the four USE Minis, the ES, the YM, the NQ, and the Russell Index, for those who like to look at it. So let's go through these and see how or why it's important to follow more than just one of these E-Minis. Because if we have a look at the data here for Friday on the 3-minute ES, you can see initially there weren't any setups on this. It was a very quiet day. There was a nice little ABC pattern in here on the intermediate degree that caught the little rally up into there, but otherwise very little going on the ES. Let's have a look at the YM. On the YM, again, very little going on. There was a TS1 sell setup here, in fact 2 attempts at this, and if you were short of this off, perhaps looking at a 15-minute high there, so in other words, if you were looking at this as a potential holy grail short trade, in other words, an initial decline down here, initial correction, and a holy grail short, which I know some of our users were looking at. In other words, you're looking at this to come down all the way to the typical wave 3 WPT here. You can see that obviously this didn't unfold as anticipated. Now this is something else I talk about in the webinars. If a market does not fold or unfold as anticipated, you need to be a little bit more aggressive with your stop loss. So for example, if I take the DP of this pivot, you can see that we actually come down to DP support here before the rally starts. So at the very least, you want to bring your stop to at least break even when you come into this level. So this would have been a break even trade. So in other words, nothing on this particular setup here. But the market I like the look of, in fact I'll have a quick look at the Russell Index, because the Russell Index gave a nice automatic TS2 sell setup here. This buy setup was on a red STF, so would have been avoided. You would have had one losing trade here early in the day of this blue STF, but there was a nice sell setup later that actually had the profit target at the low of the day. Very nice place to take profit, and that would have been a nice 3.7R profit. So even if you had a losing trade here, plus 3.7R would have made a winning day overall. But the market I want to look at is the NQ. very nice patterns on the NQ. Initially, when we look at this, there seems to be two buy setups here against a red STF, and then a standard trade setup here, TS3 buy setup on a black STF. So if you'd taken this, you'd have actually had a nice 3.1R profit at the first target there. So a very nice trade there. But wouldn't it have been nice to be able to buy the low of the day at this point in here? So a number of times we managed to catch the highs or lows of the day at MTPredictor is quite astonishing, really. So for this, what I want to do is let's clear this chart off. Let's go to the 15-minute chart, because this is what we do for you guys who follow us regularly. We use we use our higher time frame charts to project in advance support or resistance areas. Now this is very important to understand that these are leading indicators. They're on the chart in advance before the market gets there. So even before this decline unfolded, or as it was unfolding here, before it reached the low, you'd have gone back to the last pivot low, which was here, right mouse click, place this decision point level on the chart. Now this is on the chart in advance. I cannot keep stressing this enough that these are leading indicators. So let's see how this looks on the 3-minute chart. Well, as you can see, it caught the low absolutely beautifully. So in other words, these this decision point buy setup here was at the higher time frame support, so it was a good one to take for the more experienced MTPredictor users. So let's look at this in more detail. We would have had a buy setup of this blue buy bar here. but it wouldn't have been valid because it was only a 1.1 risk unit. So the trade setup was actually off this blue buy bar here. That's actually quite hard to say quickly. So it would have been off this bar here. You would have actually been taken in by one tick and then stopped out. Quite frustrating. But you see how this setup was actually at higher time frame support. Not all trade setups unfold as profitable trades. The trick is keeping them, the initial risk small, in other words the loss small when the trade does not unfold as anticipated. That's what our correct position sizing does, which is what I'm looking at here. But then you've got another buy setup here at this bar here, which actually was the very bar of the low of the day. Let's place the analysis on and let's see what happens. When the market rallied, it rallied right into our first target there, our first target of a 2.5R profit. So that's a great trade there. The profit of 2.5R was greater than our minus 1R loss, so would have made money overall. But the point I want to stress is because this 3-minute setup unfolded at 15-minute support, the more experienced users among you could have taken it, even though it's against our black STF. This is what was our red STF. This is what we talk about with the more experienced users. And this is what I talk about when a picture becomes a lot clearer. As you can see, by keeping these levels on our different time frame charts, this 15-minute support zone would have been on this 3-minute chart just waiting for you. So when you come down into that, you can then take these setups with confidence. And then also this 3-minute TS buy setup was again in the direction of the large degree trend because you were rallying up off this 15-minute support zone. So you'd have had a minus 1R loss plus 2.5R profit and then another 3R profit, which would have been a nice profitable day overall. But the point of the video is that not just because it was a good profitable day, but the pattern was a lot clearer and the setup was a lot more obvious than it has been in prior days. And this is what I talk about when I suggest people only trade when the pattern is clear and obvious and everything's coming together. And this was a great example of how this all came together here on Friday and was so much easier than the day before, particularly when you're coming in here off this 15-minute support zone. And what a great trade setup this was, buying off the low of the day there. A great trade setup there.